Hey, good morning. I'm just praying that Podge gets saved one of these days. Been praying for 3 years for that guy, so just join me in that. Hey, my name's Jake, and I'm one of the pastors here. And we're in Mark chapter 7 today, okay? Mark chapter 7. Go there. We'll get there in a minute. Last month, so I'm married to Nikki. Last month, Nikki and I did something really dumb. It's called Whole30. Maybe you've heard of it. So what Whole30 is it's basically this diet kind of thing. It's really like a cleanse detox more than a diet. It's like a 30-day thing where you just eat a certain way, really no processed stuff, no junk, really no sugar, no processed sugar especially. It's really the worst is what it is. Like if you're just feeling like, man, I'm just enjoying my life so much right now, I just wish I could enjoy it less somehow. Whole30 is like the way to go for you. It's a perfect solution for your problems that you're having. So we did Whole30. To be clear, I had no intention of doing Whole30. But here's how it happened. My wife was doing it. Bless her sweetheart. She was doing it. And we were at Costco. And I was in the food court with her. And I was eating a slice of pizza, which is really like 2 slices of pizza. And I was eating a hot dog. And I was also eating not 1, but 2 Costco churros. Okay? What's the big deal? Okay, and she was watching me eat a slice of pizza and a hot dog and 2 Costco churros. And then she said, Jake, this is harder than it needs to be. It would be so helpful if you did Whole30 with me. It's hard when we're at Costco and you're eating a pizza and a hot dog and 2 Costco churros for me to stay true on Whole30. And so we talked longer than that, and I decided to do Whole30. You'll be happy to know I made it 9 days on Whole30, but I have other strengths in life, okay? So that's what my mother tells me. We did Whole30. Whole30 is, it was created by a lady named Melissa Hartwig. Does anybody know Melissa? Like personally? Okay, cool. So just safe space here. A little bit of frustration. I'm sure she's great, okay? I'm sure she's fine. A few frustrations, though. You go on Whole30.com, and what you see is like a rules page, but then there's a recommendations section, and that's what really that's what really gets me going, frustrates me. I don't know the phrase to use. There's like a recommendations section, and what it is it's like rules about the rules. It's like rules about the rules. It's like a fence kind of around the actual rules so that you will never even be slightly tempted to break an actual rule, even if accidentally. So there's these little guidelines and recommendations, right? Things like don't cut your sweet potatoes into French fry shapes because it's also a mental thing. And so if you're cutting them into French fry shapes, you feel like you're eating French fries and it doesn't actually rewire your brain like you want it to. Or limit your fruit intake because, no processed sugar, but fruit has a lot of natural sugar, so you don't want to do too much fruit. Do some fruit to satisfy the sweet tooth, maybe, but don't do too much natural sugar in your fruit, which for me was hard too because my whole life I've been taught to eat 2 things, and one is vegetables, and one is fruit. And I'm like, okay, has my whole life been a lie? Like, who can I trust? What in the world, Melissa? And then third, there's you're not supposed to eat compliant dessert replacements even. So something that's Whole30 compliant, but it's a dessert replacement because again, it's like a mental thing. You want to rewire your brain so you're not craving something sweet after your meals. So a few frustrations. I'm sorry, I'm venting. It's not the time or place. A few frustrations. The rules, but then there's the recommendation section, and that's the rules about the rules. Here's why I say that. We're in a passage today, and the passage is really based around this problem in the first century Israel, where Jewish culture had what they called the Mishnah. The Mishnah was like their rules about the rules. The Mishnah was a compilation of Jewish oral codes and laws that if you followed them, it would help eliminate any chance that you would accidentally break an actual law, even if by accident. The Mishnah said this: tradition is a fence around the law. So if you follow that, you're definitely not going to break. You're not going to even have a chance of breaking a real law. And when I say law, I mean the Old Covenant law, the law that God gave to the people of Israel through Moses. 613 commandments that he gave from God to Israel. Most of them were through Moses. A few of them were given audibly straight to the people of Israel. The people of Israel loved the law, and fairly so, especially the Pharisees. The Pharisees absolutely loved the law. They loved it so much that they put in place tradition to act as a fence around the law. It's as if God was saying, okay, don't work on the Sabbath. They said, well, we need more specifics than that. You know, how many steps can I take on the Sabbath? The Mishnah. How much weight can I lift on the Sabbath? Well, let's put in the Mishnah. Let's put tradition in there. They needed specifics. And before I even blame them, I'll be honest, I get it, right? Like, I'm a very black and white instruction guy. At home, at least, like Nikki will say, hey, can you put the girls' laundry away? And I will say, babe, I really want to. But you watched Marie Kondo, and I'm going to do it wrong. I just am going to do it wrong, so I'm sorry. I need specifics. The Pharisees needed specifics. So they had the law, and they had tradition. It was a fence around the law. That sets the scene for our passage today. So you're in chapter 7, Mark chapter 7. I'm going to read verse 1 through 5. Track with me. So the Pharisees were gathered to him, to Jesus, with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem. And they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. I know, gross. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the tradition of the elders. And when they came from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands, right? Like the menacing question. Why don't they walk in accordance with the elders, but they eat with defiled hands? So to be fair, there were Jewish laws about ceremonial washings and cleansings, but most of these had to do just with the priests. Just with those who were in direct service to the priesthood, to the temple. But what happened is over time, cultural pressure and these unwritten expectations of the Mishnah, they would come to apply these priestly laws to all people. So that by the time Jesus got on the scene, it's like all of the super religious Jews were doing the things that only the priests were actually supposed to do. So it was like widespread, yeah, you do these things. You wash the pots and the copper vessels and the couches, apparently, before you eat. You just do it. Everybody does it. If you want to be religious. Kent Hughes would say it this way, that the concept of true inner purity had been trivialized to a system of external washings. He said that at this moment in Israel's history, at this moment, the concept of true inner purity had been trivialized to a system of external washings. Now, let's pause right here for a minute. 'Cause I'm not going to give a ton of application today. I'm kind of going to walk through the passage, and I hope that the content, by the Spirit's power, is moving and inspiring and challenging. I'm not going to give a ton of proper application, except for right now. I just want to pull out a couple things from this first kind of introductory scene from the passage, where the Pharisees are ambushing the disciples for not washing properly, okay? 3 thoughts of the Pharisees, really 3 misconceptions that the Pharisees had, 3 misguided beliefs that I think we, if we're not careful, can often believe as well. 3 misconceptions of the Pharisees. Number 1, they thought that doing holy things made you a holy person. They thought that doing holy things made you a holy person. They thought if you do enough, that will be enough. Like your activity could somehow control your destiny. Like if you did enough of what the law required, then somehow you would be declared righteous or clean or holy. That would be it. And it was actually absolutely opposite to what Jesus would come to introduce, that it's not by doing holy things that you could become holy, but actually in Christ, you could just be made holy. Not because of anything you've done, but because of all that Jesus would do and all that he has done, you could be made holy. Therefore, do holy things. Do you get the difference? You can't do holy things to become holy. Jesus can make you holy, therefore do holy things. They had it backwards. They had the effect before the cause. They had it backwards. They thought that doing holy things made you a holy person. That's not the case. 3 misconceptions of the Pharisees. Number 2 is they thought that purity was a matter of the hands, not a matter of the heart. See, they thought that purity was a matter of the hands, not a matter of the heart. They thought if you polish the outside just well enough, it doesn't matter what the inside looks like. If you protect your image well enough, then you can neglect your heart, essentially. And what this did is it meant that the gap between the outer life of the Pharisees and the inner life of the Pharisees was a massive gap. The gap between the outer life of the Pharisees and the inner life of the Pharisees was a massive gap between who people thought they were and between who they actually were. See, if integrity means that you are a whole, undivided person, which it does, the Pharisees were as disintegrated as possible. They were in pieces because they thought that purity was a matter of the hands and not a matter of the heart. 3 misconceptions of the Pharisees. Last one is that they thought avoiding sin was the same thing as following God. Okay, follow me here. I know maybe it's dicey, maybe it's splitting hairs. They thought that avoiding sin was the same thing as following God, that it wasn't just by doing the holy things that you could be made holy, but they thought that also by abstaining from the wrong things, you were in turn somehow following God. Like if you abstained from X, Y, and Z, whatever negative things there were, then you were in turn following and walking in all that God had for you, as if your abstinence from certain things was all that God was after. And you and I, please, we know this is not the case. It is not just about avoiding a sin, and that's not where it starts. That's the result of a new heart, of a transformed life, of being made holy by Jesus. And then, yes, you avoid sin. You do not avoid sin thinking that in turn means that you are obviously following God. It just doesn't work like that. Avoiding the negative doesn't mean that you're actually following the positive, if you track with me. They thought avoiding sin was the same thing as following God. God's not just after your abstinence from sin. God was not just after the Pharisees' abstinence from breaking Moses' law. No, he wanted more. No, God always wanted more than that. Jesus always wants more than that. He wants more. So I think the lesson for the Pharisees in this moment, I think a lesson for us, something we can take away from these 3 misconceptions of the Pharisees, I think is this. God does not want your holiness unless he has your heart. So it doesn't really matter what you offer until you offer you. I think it's clear that God does not want your holiness unless he has your heart. And so it doesn't even matter what you offer until you offer you. See, now don't hear me wrong. Don't think I'm saying that God doesn't care about your holiness. He cares a lot about your holiness, but it's about which comes first. He cares a lot about your holiness, but you give him you first, and he will make you holy. You give him you, and he will take care of the rest. So it doesn't matter what you offer until you offer you. See, it doesn't matter how many sacrifices you offer. It doesn't matter even if you offer your talents or your time or your treasure. It didn't matter for the Pharisees. You can offer 1,000 bulls on the temple altar. You can just keep offering. It doesn't matter until I have you. Because listen, I want more than that. I want more than that. I want more than bulls and goats and lambs and their blood on an offering. I want more than that. That is a system so I can have your heart. That's what I want. I want your heart. So it doesn't matter what you offer. You can offer everything in the world. But if you withhold yourself, God wants more than that. He wants more. We're going to keep moving. And the Pharisees ambush the disciples, right? That's how the scene starts. They just ambush them. You didn't wash your hands before you ate. Unsanitary, I guess. But like, what's the big deal, right? They ambush them. But what this does is it reveals a massive amount of brokenness about the Pharisees' religious system, okay? And Jesus cares a lot about that. Jesus cares a lot about that. He cares a lot about religion, cares a lot about people. So he responds. Mark 7, 6 through 7, we're in verse 6 through 7. Okay, and just pay attention. Eyes, ears on the text right now. Sit up straight. This is big right here, okay? The words of Jesus, he says, "Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites. Oh, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." Someone say, "No, he didn't." Come on, say no. Yes, he did, okay? Yes, he did. We need to stop right here because we cannot understand how offensive this one statement is. We cannot comprehend how unnerving and unsettling and audacious and just offensive this one statement is from the mouth of Jesus to these people. Because Jesus, what you just said is something nobody says. Like at this point, everybody on the edge and in the back who were just eavesdropping, man, they sat up straight. They turned to Jesus and they're like, because what you just said, Jesus, that's something nobody says. You don't say that. You can't say that to your friends or family in a sarcastic way. You definitely cannot say that in this place to these people, the religious leaders. You don't say that. There's no way we can understand how offensive it is. Here's the thing. Me and you are in 21st century America. You know this. Welcome. We're in 21st century America. In this text, we are in 1st century Israel. I think what we actually need to do, though, is go back 700 years previous to 700 BC, ancient Israel. We're going to do a little bit of history, okay? History hats on. Put the history hats on. Let's go. The prophet Isaiah prophesied over Israel from about 740 to 680 BC. And I want to say this to just paint a picture of the weight of what Jesus just said. So Isaiah was a prophet over the people of Israel from about 740 to 680 BC, so about 60 years. Remember, they counted backwards down to 0 AD. He was a prophet, which means he was kind of God's mouthpiece to the people of Israel. That means that he spoke about the future, yes, but also about their past. He spoke into their present as well. Very much a mouthpiece, often to just say, Israel, here's where you're at, and it doesn't look good. Israel, here's where you're at, and it's bleak, okay? It's dark. That was Isaiah's job. At this moment in history, Israel was divided into northern kingdom and southern kingdom. There was Israel in the north and Judah in the south. There were a couple key kings around this time when Isaiah wrote. There was a king named Hezekiah, and Hezekiah followed the Lord wholeheartedly. He was undivided in his commitment to the Lord. Then there was another king, and his name was Ahaz. He was very divided in his following after the Lord. He was very divided. He sought partnership with the Assyrian king. And at that time, the Assyrian empire was expanding and overtaking. And at one point, God delivered Israel from the Assyrian kings, likely because of Hezekiah's faith, because Hezekiah followed him wholeheartedly. But there was another time, and Isaiah warned them, destruction is still coming, likely because of Ahaz's lack of faith and the subsequent king's lack of faith in Israel. There's still destruction coming. And even though it wouldn't happen for 100 years, Israel would fall into captivity under the hand of Babylonia, and then would fall into greater destruction at the hand of Cyrus of Persia. Okay, I just say this because here, in the middle of a divided kingdom, Isaiah, through God, is warning Israel of the impending doom. He's reprimanding them for their past unfaithfulness. And here's actually the cool part. He's foreshadowing what their ultimate deliverance will look like, which is going to be Jesus, about 500 years after the captivity. So, get this with me. It was a whiplash existence. This moment for Israel, this was a whiplash kind of existence. In between desperate seasons of oppression and these forgetfully naive seasons of peace. Their religion was a hollow grasp for control. It was fearful, insecure, vindictive, and empty. And into this bleak, dark, religious moment, Isaiah, through the word of God, writes perhaps the most heart-piercing and gut-wrenching words in his entire book. He says, "This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me." Jesus, you can't say that, bro. You can't say that. So the Lord said what would happen through Isaiah. He said, destruction is coming. And it did, because the Lord is right about everything, isn't he? So the years passed, and destruction came. They slowly but surely, they fell into captivity under Babylonia. They fell into captivity in Persia. They fell into obscurity and silence. And now the waiting begins. 400 years from the final words of the prophet Malachi at the end of our English Old Testament. 400 years from the final words of the prophet Malachi to the arrival of Jesus on the scene. 400 years, the people of Israel had nothing to look forward to. They had nothing to hold on to. They had no hope. There was no new vision from God. There was no new revelation from God. There was no prophecy. There was no game plan for the Israelites. There was no hope, seemingly. But they had one thing. They had the law. We start to circle around. They had the law and the prophets. They called it the law and the prophets. Everything in our English Old Testament. They didn't call it the Old Testament because there was no New Testament. They were living it. And they didn't call it the Testament. They just called it the law and the prophets. That's what it was. They had the law and the prophets. So they got to work. That was all they had. That was the last thing they heard from the Lord. So they got to work, right? They studied it. They read it. They memorized it. The best of the best would rise to the top, and they memorized the whole thing. Like all of it. The whole thing. It was amazing. They were amazing. And so began the heritage of the religious elite, the Pharisees, the religious leaders. That's what they had, the law. So 400 years passes, and now the situation isn't much different. They're still under captivity under the Roman Empire. They do have some religious freedom, but just within the confines that the Romans would let them have. But their religion was just as empty as before. It was fearful, it was vindictive, it was insecure, a hollow grasp for control. But listen, what if, just bear with me, what if the Pharisees weren't trying to be the bad guys? What if that was never their plan? What if they were just trying the best with what they had? I just want us to identify a little bit if we can. What if they were just trying their best with what they had? The law and the prophets was all they had. What if they were just trying to protect the integrity of that? What if they were misunderstood heroes? Because what could be more noble than protecting the law? It was the law. So, 400 years passes. First century Gennesaret, here they are. Yet another battle with this man Jesus, this rogue type of rabbi from Nazareth who they've seen come around, and he's going around teaching the weirdest things about the temple and about the kingdom, but it sounds like his kingdom. And sometimes it sounds like he thinks he is divine. And you're in yet another battle of this holy indignation with the rabbi Jesus, wanting nothing more than to protect the integrity of the law, because that's all you had. What could be more noble than that? And another battle with Jesus, and Jesus, the nerve, out of nowhere, just pulls from his back pocket the most heart-piercing and gut-wrenching words from their own book. You can't be serious. He says, yeah, you guys remember in Isaiah's scroll, you remember that line. I know you do because you memorized the whole thing. That's why you're Pharisees. I know you remember. Do you remember what he said about the hollow religion of ancient Israel? Do you remember when he talked about their religious hypocrisy? Remember when he talked about how their lips would honor him, but their hearts were so distant from him? Do you remember that? That reminds me a lot of you guys. Oh. Yeah, you guys remind me of that line. The hypocrisy, the emptiness. So, we keep moving, but I don't think the Pharisees could move on from that. I don't think they are going to hear another word that Jesus said, right? I mean, they were shocked. They were caught in their steps, but the crowd leans in. Right? The crowd leans in. Okay, Jesus, we just heard what you said. And what you just said is something people don't say. That's something you cannot say that, Jesus. So you got to explain yourself, okay? Jesus, you better explain. So he does. He explains himself. He moves on. We're in verse 14 14 through 23, now he moves on. He says, let's talk about religion. And what he's going to do, after making the most offensive statement possible, he's going to do a quick little teaching that redefines purity for these people and ultimately reframes their whole paradigm on religion. It is a massive, massive thing he says. Here's where we go. He says, hear me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside of a person that going into him can defile him. But the things that come out of a person are what defile him. See, you think purity is a matter of the hands. It's a matter of the heart, Jesus is saying. Whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart but his stomach and is expelled. Thus he declared all foods clean. Melissa Hartwig of Whole30, I hope you heard that. He declared all foods clean. So I don't make the rules. And he said, it's not about that. I'm just kidding. I'm the worst. He said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. What a nasty list, right? What a slimy, gross list. See, after he makes one of the most offensive statements possible, he explains. And in his explanation, I believe he really makes this one teaching, this one statement that to us sounds pretty commonplace, but to them would have been revolutionary, like nothing they had ever been taught. He makes this statement. He said, purity is not about the outside of a person, but the inside. Purity is not about the outside of a person, but the inside. I think he would say, yeah, you Pharisees, you have it wrong. You have it backwards. You think that somehow by doing holy things, you're going to be made holy, but you have it wrong, okay? You have it backwards. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the rules and the recommendations. I'm tired of this fence that you've put up around the law. It is driving a wedge between God and his people, and that is not the heart of God. And that makes me sick, because what started as a noble attempt to protect the law has become this elitist system of fear-mongering and control that you harbor like a weapon against God's people, and I am sick of it. I'm sick of it. That is absolutely wrong, absolutely backwards. Because what you're giving God is lip service. So I said what I said because it's true. I made the comparison because it's true. The words from Isaiah to the people of ancient Israel, yeah, it sounds like you. I said what I said because it's true. Because what people don't need is this pressure and this unwritten pressure and expectation to uphold the law. Like by doing that, they could be holy. God does not need honoring words and distant hearts. God does not need honoring words and distant hearts. He doesn't need that. He doesn't want that. So I said what I said because it's true. Pharisees, what you're giving God is lip service. He doesn't need that. Says God wants life change, not lip service. God wants life change, not lip service. And that's just not where you're leading my people. We can't overstate how world-shattering this conversation would be, okay? This comparison between external purity and internal purity. We can't understand how world-changing and revolutionary it was. It's definitely not the law of Moses. It's definitely not tradition. So you got to think, in perspective of the Pharisees, like, Jesus, what are you trying to say? What are you implying here? Are you trying to rewrite our entire religion and upend our entire lives? That's what it feels like. But Jesus would say elsewhere in the Gospels, no, I'm not rewriting it. I'm fulfilling it. He would say, I'm not rewriting it. I'm not changing it. I'm fulfilling it. See, Pharisees, you've lived in an old covenant. You've lived in a way of relating to God that had an expiration date. This would not last forever. This would not work forever. This would truly never work to bring ultimate forgiveness, to bring ultimate purity, to bring ultimate life and ultimate hope. You have lived under a covenant that had an expiration date. So yes, what I'm teaching is new because something new is happening here. There is a new way to relate with God that's being ushered in. And listen very close. This new covenant will not be built on the sacrifice of lambs or goats or bulls. It will be built on the sacrifice of one true sacrificial lamb. And it wouldn't be built on the temple altar. This sacrifice, this covenant would be built on a Roman cross on a hill called Golgotha. And there would be life and purity and hope that wouldn't be found in mountains of sacrifices or rituals or offerings or ceremonies. Life and hope that would be ultimately found in one empty tomb. And it wouldn't be written on stone tablets to give to the people of Israel. This will be written on your hearts for you to carry with you. And this new life, it won't live in Solomon's temple or the temple of Herod. You will be the temple now. Your bodies, your life, you're going to carry the sacred with you. Oh, this is big. So Jesus reframes their entire paradigm for religion, for purity. He says purity is internal, not external. And he says there's a new way of relating to God that won't be based on sacrifice or ceremony or ritual. It'll be holiness from somewhere else where you are made holy. So he redefines purity. There's a new way to live with God. But here's the cool thing. You don't even have to take his word for it in the text. We're going 24 through 30. You don't even have to take his word for it. You can kind of see what he does. Jesus does this thing again and again where he teaches something, but then he demonstrates it. Like he illustrates exactly what he means. So listen, I'm not going to read it, but verses 24 through 30, if you're tracking, what happens is Jesus leaves the interaction with the Pharisees. Then he goes to his disciples and he gives kind of a quick explanation of it. After that, he leaves town. He goes to a different town. And on his way, he is met by a woman whose daughter is possessed by a demon. Met with the woman whose daughter is possessed by a demon. And they have a quick back and forth with actually some really cool nuances that we won't get into. But they have a quick back and forth conversation. And ultimately, he heals her daughter. There's a couple things about the interaction, though, I want to pull out if we can. One, bear with me, is that she was a woman. Like, okay, what are you trying to say? Like, don't get into the gender thing. No, it's really powerful. It's really cool. Because in a culture that was dominated by patriarchy and chauvinism, Jesus gives voice and influence and empowerment to women all the time. And that was new. That was amazing. Second, she was a Gentile. And get this, she wasn't just a Gentile, and that means non-Jewish. She was a Syrophoenician Gentile, which meant she was like a Gentile's Gentile. She was like as far from Jewish as you could be, right? Like as far from Jewish as you could be. And I think it's amazing. Because here, in just one quick interaction, Jesus demonstrates what he just taught. And what he just taught is that there is a new way to be pure. There's a new type of relationship that you can have with God. And it is available not only for the people of Israel, but it's available for all people everywhere. And so what he does is he goes to the perfect representative of all people, a Syrophoenician Gentile woman whose daughter is possessed by a demon. It doesn't get more all people than that, okay? Like it's the classic case of a Syrophoenician Gentile woman with a demon-possessed daughter. Like that is all people right there. He goes to her and he has an interaction with her to show just how far this new covenant power and love will reach, to show that there is nothing that can stop it, to show that there is no border of gender or race or culture. There is no wall that can stop it. There's nothing that can stop this new covenant love and power that he is introducing. That demonic influence has no authority over what he is ushering in. And he gives us just another glimpse of who he is and what he is here to do. And this is where we're going to land. Just a few more minutes. This is where we're going to land. Because in this scene, right, there's hints. There are hints of what Jesus is doing. There are hints of the new covenant. A covenant that wouldn't be built on the sacrifice of bulls and goats, but it'd be built on something new. And it wouldn't be dependent on outward behavior and holy standards of the people, but it would be built on something new. There are hints in this scene, and that's cool to see. But the cool thing is this. It wasn't the big reveal. Now, track with me. It wasn't the big reveal. The big reveal would happen just weeks later on a cross and in a tomb. Because just weeks later, under the requirements of the Old Covenant, there would be one more lamb sacrificed for sin. Under the requirements of the Old Covenant, there would be one final lamb sacrificed for sin. One more time, blood would be spilled. Just one more. One more time, blood would be spilled. But it wouldn't be spilled on the temple altar. It would be spilled on a Roman cross on a hill called Golgotha. One more time, a lamb sacrificed for sin, but that would be it. Listen, that would be it, and we'd be done. No more sacrifices, no more lambs, no more having to uphold the tradition and the law so that we could be made holy. No more. It's done. One more sacrifice, one more time. Because when this lamb would be sacrificed, on Friday he would be laid in a tomb, lifeless, but on Sunday he wouldn't be there. And one more lamb sacrificed for sin, and that would be it. And it wouldn't happen on the sacrifice of bulls and goats and rams or on the upholding of tradition that the people of Israel could muster up. It would just be his obedience. It would be his perfect life. It would be his purity substituted for our impurity. He would take over. He would take our place on the cross, and that would settle it. That would do it. So the Old Testament would point to him. It would point to this. The New Testament would point back to him. It would point to this. One more sacrifice. One more time. And this is the new covenant. This is the new covenant. He would introduce it there. On a cross, and even more, in an empty tomb. This is it. And this covenant, I'll tell you what, this is a one-sided deal. Honestly, this is a one-sided thing. It's not you upholding the tradition or mustering up some kind of holiness or manufacturing some purity that you can to bring to the table. No. This is a one-sided thing where he was as pure as we could ever need. He lived the perfect life we never could. He died the all-sufficient death you and I never could. He did what mountains of lambs sacrificed and goats and bulls could never accomplish. He did it because in this new covenant, it's all Jesus. He did it. He authored it. He initiated it. He sustained it. He did the work. He saw it to completion. He finished it. It is just Jesus. Only Jesus. Always only Jesus. That is the new covenant. And it's an incredible gift. It's an incredible gift. Because Jesus, who is the true sacrificial Lamb of God, he did everything necessary for you and for me. Listen, all that's left to do is believe. People were asking Jesus in the book of John, what is the work of God? And he said, the work of God is to believe in him who he sent. All that's left to do is believe. And don't hear me wrong, it's not that God doesn't care about your holiness. It's not that he doesn't want you to take steps of faith and obedience in him. He wants that. But it starts with belief, and there's nothing more. It's just believe. Just believe. And so if there's application today, that's it. If there's application, that's it. Would you accept what the Pharisees could not accept? They were either unwilling or unable to accept it. That there is nothing you can bring to the table to atone for anything. So don't fake it. Don't force it. And I think there's a couple maybe groups of people I might speak to this morning in that vein. As I just ask, would you just believe? Would you consider Jesus and just believe? I think in the room there's probably a curious skeptic. There's probably a curious skeptic in the room, and you would say, I don't know about this. I'm here because the person next to me finally got me in, or I just am on a whim. I'm here, and that's awesome. I get that. And you're thinking, I don't know about religion because I've known people in the past, and they were a lot like the Pharisees. And it seemed like they loved their tradition or their religion more than they loved me. And that just seemed wrong. And so I don't know, I'm just not into the religion thing. I get that. That's fair. But would you consider a resurrection? What about a resurrection? That's fine if you're not into the religion thing. But what about a resurrected man who could give you an absolutely full life? Would you consider Jesus maybe more seriously than you ever have? And then believers in the room, I guess I just want to say be careful. Not so much of be careful of out there or the world, there's scary things that are happening. Can we just be careful of what's happening in here? Be careful together of what's happening in here. Is it possible that somewhere along the line you may have believed the lie that you had to do something or you had to perform a certain way to continue God's favor in your life? Have you ever felt that way? Then you're on the road to giving him lip service when he wants life change. Can we be careful of what's happening in here? I'm going to say it. Church is a lame hobby, okay? Say it. Church is a lame hobby. Like, get a boat or something. You don't have to do this. You don't have to be here. If you're here because you feel like, I just need to be here because I just want to be holy. No, stop. God has made you holy by Christ's all-sufficient work on the cross for you. Therefore, do holy things. Therefore, be holy. It's nothing more. Nothing more you need than that. I think the lesson today for us is similar to what it might have been for the people of first century Gennesaret, similar to what it would have been in ancient Israel, but maybe one step further for us. On this side of the resurrected Christ, I just want to leave us with this. Don't give Jesus lip service when he died for life change. Avoid the mistake that the Pharisees perpetually made. Accept what they were unwilling or unable to accept. Don't give Jesus lip service when he died for life change. Would you pray with me? Lord, thank you. Thank you for your presence in the room. Thank you that when we gather, we're not just singing songs and we're not just saying words. Lord, your Spirit is moving and working and you're connecting the dots. So would our minds and our hearts be open and soft to you today? I just pray over the different stages and seasons represented in the room. I pray over those who are reticent about religion because they've met some unfair religious people. I pray for the seasoned veterans, Lord, who sometimes slip in and out of legalistic tendencies, in and out of thinking, I got to do it. I got to uphold the law. I got to do this, do this, do this. Lord, would you free us? Lord, free us from that. Help us believe. Remind us that the work of God is just to believe in Jesus. And the rest follows. The rest follows. Then we walk in obedience, we walk in faith, we pursue holiness, but only after you've made us holy and made us clean. Lord, we thank you. You've done all the work. You've seen it to completion, and you will continue seeing it to completion. Lord, we love you. We praise you. In your name, amen.
The chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. In Jesus Christ, my living one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to break. And out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Come on, sing it out. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the
So that's incredible. Jesus declared the victory. He won it for us, and all that's left to do is walk in victory. All that's left to do is believe and walk out in victory, living in holiness and obedience because of his victory. That's it. Hey, if you want to pray with someone, we'll be over here. We'd love to pray with you. And everybody who's serving or wants to serve, we will see you tonight in the Student Center. See you next week.